Reason I use red flag, green flag instead of strengths and weaknesses. I see strengths and weaknesses as permanent attributes, right? They're parts of your character perhaps that, you may work on them, but that may never be natural for you. I see red flags and green flags as temporary. There are things you can maximize, minimize, eliminate, especially in terms of red flags. So that's why I use that terminology instead of strength, weakness. The idea behind this is you'll have good things and you'll have bad things, right? And we all do, by the way. Don't just think because someone's got a really good resume that they don't have a red flag. I guarantee they do. Just like even if you've got a few of them, you're probably going to have some really good things about you as well, right? A red flag may be something like you don't have much experience. If you've got large gaps in your employment history. Again, if you have something on a credit report or a criminal background check that's questionable. If you don't stay at your positions more than, let's say, 2 years. 2 years is pretty average, right, for them to recoup their investment in you. These are all considered red flags, right? Green flags are going to be things like longevity at your company. They're going to be your experience, professional associations, volunteer work, because volunteer work generally has transferable skills in it. If you've been home with your kids, you have lots of skills that you've developed. And generally, women don't think about it in those terms. But I will tell you, my sister-in-law, I spent 6 weeks from the time I got laid off to the time I went back to school with her. She was a full-time mom, okay? Hardest 6 weeks of my life. I was so excited to go back to school. Couldn't wait. And she just laughed at me. She's like, I do this every day. I said, you should get an award for it. I'm going back to school. Couldn't take it. I couldn't be at home. I'd have a very hard time being a home caregiver, actually, because of being in that very domestic routine. But that's, I have a hard time with that. So what I want you to think about, and I'm going to give you, let's say, 10 minutes to kind of brainstorm, and then I'll have you work together. I want you to go on your green flags first. What are things, transferable skills, good things about your work history, about your character, because character is very important to potential employers. Your program here is actually a green flag, right? Because it's going to lead to a certification at the state level. So I want you to think about what would your green flags be? And then I want you to think about how you can maximize them, both in a cover letter and in an interview. Okay, because you can. And this may be something that if you're struggling with, when you work together, may actually come together for you a little bit better. So again, what are your green flags? Identify them. And 2, let's work together on how we can maximize them. Go first so you can learn, a little bit about what I think my green flags are. 1, I am very flexible. Okay. 2, I am a fast learner. 3, I am an expert researcher. I can find the answer to just about anything. Ask me to Google something, you'd be amazed at what I find, because I have very high information literacy. 4, I love teaching. And so I spend a lot of time learning how to do it better. So those would be what I would consider my top 4 green flags. So how do you think I could maximize those in an interview?
I think the technology literacy is a big one, especially today. You absolutely have to know how to use a computer or anything to do anymore.
So it doesn't really matter what the career field is, that's a transferable skill.
The ability to learn something faster than having to have to retrain it and you take up things so that they don't have to keep spending time on you when they can help others that are having more difficulties.
And so what I could say is something like, you could reduce your training costs because you're not going to necessarily have to show me 3 or 4 times. You can show me once and I'll remember it, right? So it's a way for them to reduce how much time they'll spend, time and money, right, in training me. And at that point, I could tie in my internet literacy and say, and one of the ways I can reinforce this is I can go home and really practice those skills and perhaps even find more efficient ways to do things. What about flexibility? Why is flexibility a good green flag to have?
Well, if you go for a job interview and you say, I'm only available on Friday and Saturday,
Mm-hmm.
and I can't work in the mornings on Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, now if they're looking for somebody who wants to work Tuesdays and Thursdays
Mm-hmm.
and Fridays and Saturdays,
Mm-hmm.
that's great, but if they're not,
Mm-hmm.
you disqualify yourself.
Well, and I will tell you as a CNA, if you are willing to work night shifts, if you're willing to work long shifts and you're willing to work holidays, you're going to be paid at a higher rate than if you can only work during the day. Not saying you should, but what's good about being a CNA is there really are 24-hour, 7-day shifts, 365 days a year. Because it doesn't matter whether it's a holiday or not, whether you're helping someone at home or whether you're in a long-term care facility, these people are going to need services. And so flexibility is a really good thing to have, but so is the ability to flex, right? And say, look, I'm only available during the week and this is why, or I'm only available to work night shifts. In this industry, that's not as big an issue as it could be in other industries. So having time constraints is not going to be as big a red flag as a CNA as it might be in other industries because you need so much care all the time. You can also talk about having a meaningful purpose of life. We forget that this is something we can talk about in an interview. Not necessarily the spiritual aspect of that, but having a life of meaning and how this position is going to fit into my overall philosophy of life. Very important. Because they're going to ask you, why this job? Right? And if you can say, I really am a compassionate person, I learn quickly, it is important to me to care about other people. So this job fits into my overall philosophy of life, which is we have to care about each other. Right? That's one way of taking your personal philosophy of life, incorporating it into your position, which you should do. You spend most of your life at work, right?
Or I like working with elderly.
Mm-hmm. And they're going to ask you why. Be authentic, be yourself. Actually, a potential employer's going to want to know what's important to you. They're going to want to see some kind of emotion in you. They're not, especially in this field. I will tell you, every employer that I've talked to in this town said if the person I'm interviewing doesn't say something about compassion, almost a need or a desire to help, I'm not going to hire them. If they show zero passion for helping others, why would I want them to work for me? So that's good. For me, I would rather work with the elderly than I would with children. There are other people who have a passion for children, right? And so knowing, one, the population that you're passionate about is going to help, because you should do something that you enjoy, right? And two, if you have that passion and you can say, you know what, I really like working with the elderly. They teach me so much, right? They've given, in my mind, they've given so much to society. They deserve their golden years to be as enjoyable as possible. And I really feel that way. Does that come off as cheesy?
No, it's
just,
No.
it seems like if you're trying to say that in a job interview, though, I feel like it could come off as insincere. You'll say
No.
anything that you want them to hear.
No, and most employers are going to want to know something about you. So even in a job interview, which can be nerve-wracking, right? Be yourself, right? Tell them what matters to you. And they know the difference between sincerity and someone just saying what they want to hear. You can tell with your body language. This is that 90% that's going beyond what you say. You know, talking about your ability to prioritize. As a CNA, your ability to prioritize is probably your best skill, right? Because whether you work in long-term care or whether you work in home care, you're going to have tasks to do, but depending on what's going on with your client, you may have to reprioritize very quickly. And so the ability to time manage and prioritize and know what's important and the ability to adapt to changing circumstances are really amazing skills to have as a CNA. And I would very much play that up in an interview. And especially now that you've got some experience taking care of someone at home, I would list specific examples of how you were able to adapt to someone's changing mood or changing circumstance, how you were able to reprioritize. The more examples you can give and things you have done, the better you'll look towards your interviewer. Because you're not just, again, trying to tell them what you have done or what they want to hear. You're explaining exactly what you've done. It may not be an exact, right fit, but it's going to show, again, that you can problem solve, that you're creative, and that you really do have the skills you say you have. So based on what she has said, what position do you think would be very well suited for Peg? Absolutely. Home care, because you have creativity, the fact that you're an excellent cook. If you do home care, you need to cook at least one thing well, minus spaghetti. Okay? Spaghetti and cereal. You know, I don't cook, right? But it's like I have learned how to make one meal really well if I have to. But if you're doing home care, you're going to have to do some light cooking, cleaning, housekeeping, showers.
Like that, just even,
So again, can you start seeing how you can take things that on paper look like, oh, well, yeah, I have these skills, but how you can transition them into really selling points for yourself in an interview. Probably things that, and my guess is when you go home, you'll expand this list, and you should, right? As you brainstorm something, write it down. Because the more that you think about the job search process, the more that you think about potential interview answers and questions, the better you'll actually do in an interview. Because it's not like you're coming up with this information on the spot. It shows that you're immersed in the process. All right, so that's the good part of this exercise. Now to go for the bad part, or the more challenging part. Red flags. Things that you think, and again, I'll give you about 10 minutes to think about them, things that might not come off well in an interview or a background check. So again, I'll start. My top 3 red flags. The first, I've had 4 positions in 3 years. Okay, that's also obviously shows an issue with longevity. The second, my credit report would come back with a bankruptcy on it. Okay, that again would be a problem with a credit check. And 3, I'm overeducated, meaning that it is very difficult when I go in. I'm generally better educated than the person I'm interviewing with. That is seen as a downside. Okay. Now the question is, how would you recommend that I deal with those red flags? I probably would not put my master's degrees on my resume if I know that that could be an issue. Again, I'm not lying about my credentials. I'd be lying if I put them on there and I hadn't earned them. But I'd probably just put my bachelor's degree. That is one way that I can deal with the overeducation part.
I'm telling them about your bankruptcy.
Disclosing and explaining before they found that out on their own. You'd be amazed at how far disclosure can go. And I can also say it's been 9 years, right? It'll completely fall off my credit report within a year. So, and I can demonstrate, well, the problem I have now is I have no credit because I'm not in debt, right? Credit cards see that as a bad thing. Now, and here's the thing, that may look really poor to someone giving you credit, but that would look really, that's a way to deal with something like that in a really positive way in a job interview. One, disclose your bankruptcy if it's still within a period of time in which it shows. Two, explain it, okay? Most common reasons for bankruptcy: divorce, lack of jobs because of a layoff, and medical, right? And I'm going to tell you, if you went into bankruptcy for one of those 3 reasons, chances are an employer's not going to take it, is not going to count it against you. Because it shows that in each of those very drastic life changes, you went into bankruptcy out of no fault of your own. And they're looking at this as a character builder, right? They want to know you have reliable character. 2, by saying, you know what, after I went through this really devastating issue, I said I would never deal with debt again, and that I would live within my means regardless of what my means are. And I can demonstrate that going forward, that's exactly what I've done, right? And so that's a really good way of taking something potentially damning and really being able to minimize its negativity and spin it into a positive. What about having 4 jobs in 3 years?
Was there a good reason for it?
Absolutely there was. First year, I graduated from college and my career was as a college student, my job. I had a graduate internship, right? Of course, that ended when I was no longer a student. The second job I had, I was hired to fix a company. I knew going in, it was on a contract basis. They were nearing bankruptcy. They hired me to reorganize the company so that it could continue. It took me 9 months, and I did it very well, and to where now they've not had an issue. So again, even though that shows I was only there 9 months, I was hired for a specific purpose that I was able to do on time and under budget. Third, I'm a college professor now. I teach part-time while I own my own business. So while I've had 4 jobs in 3 years, it's not because of a lack of longevity. And so there are really good reasons on why I've had those. And I can show that I've been teaching at the same time as owning my business, right? So I can say I am working while my business grows. So yes, it's a way to turn something that on paper can look really negative and really take it into a positive. So, I mean, that's definitely. Now, what about the fact that she left a job after a month?
If she had a good reason for it, and explain that there's not really an issue.
I would do it in terms of career. It's when she came to take care of Sarah's mom. So again, you're going from a customer service position that may have very limited outlook, growth outlook, and you switched because you had the ability to go into a different career field that can show a kind of a brighter future, right? You switched a job to a career. That's very easy to explain. And most people would say, yeah, it makes sense to go from this kind of job to this kind of career opportunity. And so that would be a really positive way, again, to switch both of those issues around so that it shows a little bit of a maturing process, which is a good thing. And it also shows that you're focusing on your future and what's important to you. And there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. And if they ask you, what's your 5-year plan? You can say, you know what, I plan to be a CNA for 1 to 2 years, and then I really do want to become an LPN. Okay, that's going to be an 18-month program. And tell them, I'm not looking necessarily to go someplace else as an LPN, right? If I like the job, you like me, I would stay on in that capacity. But I would just like further education. They're not going to be upset about that. That actually shows initiative. But if I also come in and say, you know what, I want to be a CNA because I want to help a specific group of people, and I'm not really interested in doing anything else, that doesn't look bad either, because they win both ways. It is illegal for them to ask those questions. It is illegal for them to ask if you have children, if you have a husband, what your husband does. All of those things are
If you have
illegal.
health problems,
Yes, health problems.
it's illegal.
It's illegal. And I would say, you know what, I'm not comfortable asking those questions because it's not about me at that point. It's illegal to ask those types of questions. Yeah. But most of us answer them because we're like, crap, if I don't answer them, they won't hire me. But yeah, no, they're illegal.
3 different places have told me, because you're military, you're not reliable, you could be moved at any minute.
So they're discriminating against military spouses. I would bring that up on post.
Oh my gosh.
I would go to the FRG and say, I was turned down from 3 positions because my husband's military. And layoffs, I mean, in this economy, they're going to understand that. And they're going to understand that when he lost his wife, the income goes down. They couldn't afford someone full-time anymore. So they're going to understand those things too. With the poor credit, again, you've explained that. You explained you don't use credit. And the 2 things that you have in collection, you're on a payment plan with them. So again, because they're using credit as a character reference, right? They're not making sure that you're fiscally responsible. They're looking at it as, are you a dependable person? By disclosing that and saying, you know what, I'm going to give you access to my credit report, but I want to disclose this first. You're demonstrating the strength of your character. And you're giving yourself the opportunity to explain it before it's a surprise. I always recommend, if there's a red flag, do not let it be a surprise, right? When they ask about your position at Memorial, say, you know what, I'd had surgery, I'd lost my dad. I take full responsibility for the fact that my work went down, my productivity, the quality of my work went down. However, this is how I have changed that. This is what I've learned. I went to grief workshops. And so again, you're showing that, yes, I made a mistake perhaps, or yes, I made a poor choice, or life got in the way, which is what happened in this case. Life got in the way and you didn't know how to deal with it. So what you've done is you've learned how to deal with that specific issue going forward. Absolutely. So there are, again, not going to college or not finishing college is not as detrimental in this career field as it is in others, because you still have to get a state license, right? You still have to prove competency, right? And what I like about it is, one, rather than going to school for 4 years and then realizing I really don't like nursing, which I've had friends do, they're like, they get into their clinical experience their last 6 months and they're like, uh-oh. This gives you the opportunity to say, this is what I like, this is the career I really do want to go into, and to decide what kind of career to pursue, right? I want to be an LPN, but I want to be an LPN for this population, or I want to work with these people. And so it's a really amazing first step. And it's a way to build on, in your case, Peg, the experience you already have. It kind of rounds out your experience. So that's a good thing.